Welcome to another YouTube video by the Draft Duo. This is myself, Nolzey, and my co-host, Jacksie. We are dedicated to all things draft and want to bring the FPL Draft Mode to a wider audience.
Follow us on TikTok, Instagram and Twitter and keep up to date with our weekly podcast, FPL Draft Duo, for in-depth discussions on waiver suggestions, trade dilemmas and tips and tricks for you to succeed and have a successful drafting season.
Our waiver of the week this week was Michael Elise with 1 goal and 3 bonus points. It was unfortunate that Eze picked up an injury, but he still looks like a great asset going forward.
Our game week 13 punt of the week was Anthony Elanga. He's now returned twice in the last 2 game weeks, and while he was just a punt, he now seems like a long-term hold.
Looking at the bottom 10 teams in the fixture ticker, Palace, who were previously top, have now dropped down a couple of places. Them very valuable Palace defenders now don't look too hot. They play tough fixtures like Liverpool, City and Chelsea over the next 7 games, so now might be a good time to trade some of them defensive assets. They have West Ham and Bournemouth in the next 2, so if you want to trade them early, you might avoid them tougher fixtures.
Next team to note is Brentford. Brentford are mid-table on the fixture ticker. That is because they do have a blank in game week 18, but taking their next 4 fixtures into consideration, they have Luton, Brighton, Sheffield and Villa in their next 4 games, and these are games that Brentford can definitely attack, so the likes of Mbomo, Wissa would be fantastic picks. Outside of that, we'll be looking at Jensen and possibly Norgard in those 12 plus size leagues.
Looking at the top 10 in terms of the fixture ticker, Forest have dropped down to 2nd, but they still have a lovely run of fixtures. We already talked about a couple of their options, but there's a couple more to come later on. Chelsea now start to enter that great run of fixtures that they have. Brighton next week, followed by United, Everton, and then into Sheffield, Wolves, Palace and Luton. We talked about Caldwell last week, and if you picked him up, fair play. He's going to be a nice hold over the next coming while. Some Chelsea players might be worth a trade just before that very good run of fixtures. With James's red card, Disasi now looks like a hot asset that would probably play right back. There's many other valuable players, such as Palmer and Sterling, but if you're in a very large league and you just want a player for Chelsea, Conor Gallagher is a nail player. Not very exciting, but could be a good asset if you really want one of those Chelsea players. Arsenal are top of the clean sheet odds this week. They have a 55% chance at a clean sheet against Wolves, and there is 1 or 2 players that may be picked up from Arsenal. Zinchenko, we talked about him last week. If he's still on your waiver, he might be a good option to pick up against Wolves, but he may get rotated over the busy Christmas period. Arsenal do currently have the best defence in the league. They've conceded the least amount of goals and they have the lowest expected goals conceded with 0.9. If you could get a starting Arsenal defender in your team that played majority of games, it would be a very good option.
Liverpool are 2nd for the highest possibility of a clean sheet with a 48% chance against Fulham at home. Matip has started the last 2 fixtures, but Kanate is back fit, so if you did want to take a punt on game week 14, Kanate could be an option for you. Brentford and Burnley could be some great options to look at this weekend, with Brentford having a 45% chance of a clean sheet and Burnley with a 40% chance of a clean sheet. Do listen to the end of the video where we'll give a breakdown of some possible waiver suggestions on both these teams.
Looking at the bottom 5 teams with the least chance of keeping a clean sheet this week, Luton have a 15% chance against Brentford. We are going to talk about a couple of waiver suggestions from Brentford, and Brentford also have a 36% chance at scoring 2 or more goals in that game.
This week's trade dilemma is Kudus and Jackson for Martinelli and Højlund. So I'm going to take a look at the Kudus and Jackson side of things, and Nolzey's going to look at the Martinelli and Højlund. First, the Kudus. Last game week, Kudus returned with 2 assists, securing West Ham the win. In his last 3 games, he's 1 goal and he has 3 assists. So West Ham have plenty of attacking options, and with the likes of James Ward-Prowse there, I do think Kudus will continue his form.
Looking at Martinelli, we looked at him in detail last week and not much has changed. He had 1 shot on target last game week and only racked up 0.13 XGI and got whipped after 78 minutes. So all the things we talked about last week were still apparent this week. Underperforming his numbers and not getting full 90 minutes.
Jackson has 6 goals so far this season, although this may be inflated because he did score 3 of those against the 9-man Tottenham Hotspur. Chelsea are 4th on the fixture ticker. They play Brighton, United, Everton, Sheffield, Wolves and Crystal Palace. The thing about Chelsea, which is worth noting, is they've scored 4 goals in a game 3 times this season. So just based off this, is they can score goals. The risk then with Jackson is Nkunku is expected back on the 3rd of December, but I don't think this is going to reduce Jackson's minutes initially. Over the next 5-10 game weeks, when Nkunku does come back, I feel he will be eased back into the team.
When we look at Højlund missed game week 13 and allowed Martial to start, where he got a goal and an assist. I don't think this affects Højlund that much, but it is worthy to note that Højlund hasn't scored or got any assists in the Premier League this year. He has scored 5 goals in the Champions League, but hasn't returned yet in the Premier League. Although if you look at this trade on the surface, Højlund and Martinelli are 2 big names versus Kudus and Jackson, the informed duo of Kudus and Jackson outweighed the underperforming Højlund and Martinelli. If we look back at this trade at the end of the year, Højlund and Martinelli might outscore Kudus and Jackson. But we really want to take it in stages, the next 5 to 10 game weeks. Because Chelsea are in form and Kudus is playing out of his skin, we think over the next 10 game weeks, these 2 players are going to outscore the big names of Højlund and Martinelli. Kudus and Jackson have really high value right now, and we'd be looking to keep them. Coming on to the all-important waiver suggestions. Last week, as we said, goalkeeper waivers depend on the game week. We have noticed that the Forest goalkeeper Vlachodimos is still available in a lot of leagues. Turner was dropped, and maybe some managers were afraid that he was going to get back in. If you pick him up, there's 2 or 3 fixtures in the next 5 that he has a possibility of keeping a clean sheet. They play Everton, Fulham, Wolves, Spurs and Bournemouth. And even if he doesn't keep any clean sheets, he's likely to get a lot of save points.
Next up is our defender waiver suggestions. So we're going to rank these in order of preference. So number 3 is Charlie Taylor. So Burnley play Sheffield United this weekend. He does play relatively attacking, and as we mentioned before, Burnley have a 40% chance of a clean sheet this weekend.
In second position, we have a couple of options. Ben Mee versus Luton this week could be a great pickup. He's coming back from injury, he started the last 2 games, so he might have gone under the radar and might be on your waiver. Pinnock is probably in a lot of teams, but if not, he's also a great option. Third out of them Brentford defenders that are nailed, Ayer has started the majority of games this season. If you can't get your hands on Mee or Pinnock, Ayer is a great option to have this week, with Brentford having a 45% chance at a clean sheet.
Our number 1 defender waiver suggestion is Disasi. So James, he's out due to suspension. He received 2 yellow cards against Newcastle. Last week, Caldwell was our Chelsea pickup, and these Chelsea assets are now looking at great pickups over the next 5 to 10 game weeks.
Our bonus waiver suggestion this week is Romero of Spurs. Although he's still currently suspended and will miss the City game, this mightn't be a bad thing. If you have room for him on your bench, and you can ride the wave of Spurs' poor defence, you might have a very good asset come the end of Christmas. Even if you don't like him as an option, he could be good trade fodder. In our midfield waiver suggestions, if you're in a large size league and you're looking for a route into some good teams with some decent fixtures, as we mentioned, Gallagher might be a good option. Chelsea have that good run of fixtures and he seems like a nailed asset in that team all season. Another player like that is McAllister. He's playing for Liverpool and they play Fulham and Sheffield, 2 fixtures in a row. He does play very deep and he's not that exciting, but if you're in a big league and you're looking for a player in a big team, those 2 could be good options.
Number 3 on the midfield waiver suggestions is Youri Tielemans. So he started in game week 12 and played the full 90 minutes, played relatively well. In game week 13, he came on after 45 for Diaby and got an assist. With Kamara suspended due to 5 yellow cards, Tielemans can be a great option for this game week 14 fixture against Bournemouth. Villa have the 2nd most goals as well this season, so hopefully Youri Tielemans cannot get on the end of it or get an assist in this great fixture.
Number 2 on our list is Jensen. He could be a great asset over the next couple of weeks as Brentford have a great run of fixtures. He is also a dead ball specialist and can score directly or whip a ball in for someone else. Brentford also have a very good aerial threat in the previously mentioned players in Ben Mee and Ethan Pinnock. Jensen is a fantastic pick as he has many routes to points. Number 1 in our midfield waiver suggestions this week. We talked about this player at length in our podcast. It is Morgan Gibbs-White. He had a great game in game week 13 and he played more central with Chris Wood dropping deeper in the pitch. If you cannot get your hands on Morgan Gibbs-White, Elanga, who played left wing for Forest, also picked up similar positions on the opposite side to Morgan Gibbs-White. With Wood dropping in deep, or even the possibility of Morgan Gibbs-White going up top and Callum Hudson-Odoi back in the team, both of these players could be great assets. We would prefer Morgan Gibbs-White as he has penalties and might play centrally, but if not, Elanga could be a fantastic player over the next coming game weeks. They play Everton, Fulham, Wolves, Spurs and Bournemouth, and look like a very different side in terms of attacking in the last couple of game weeks.
Our punt of the week, first up, is Tavernier. Now, he may be overvalued because he returned at the weekend, but I do still think he is a good pick going forward. He is on set pieces, has some great fixtures in game week 17, 18 and 19.
If you are still in need of a player in a large size league, then Burnley players that we mentioned last week, Goodmanson, Colioso and Brownhill, are all good assets. Goodmanson continued to rack up some good numbers with 4 key passes, and Colioso got an assist for a penalty. On to our forward waiver suggestions. Usually there's not a lot of forwards on the waiver, but this week we have 4 good suggestions. Fourth on the list is Ogbene. Now, there was a question asked about Ogbene on our podcast, so if you want a more in-detail response regarding Ogbene as a pick, go listen to our podcast. He is a starting forward and has been playing at right wing for Luton. He's very important to Luton in terms of their counter-attack, and Luton don't look bad at home. The problem is that Luton have 4 very tough home fixtures in the next 4 games. So Ogbene, although he's a starting striker, is playing on the wing and plays for a poor Luton side, but he's going to be an upgrade on anyone that's not playing.
The next 2 waiver suggestions are Ollie McBurney and Jay Rodriguez. So they are playing against each other this weekend. McBurney, he did return last game week, he was back in the team, back from an injury. But if I did have the option, I will be looking at Jay Rodriguez. He is on penalties and Burnley are playing at home. He pips McBurney in our waiver suggestions, but if Jay Rodriguez is already picked up, McBurney can still be a great pick.
Now, a couple of people may have picked him up early, but if you haven't done so already, it's only 7 game weeks left until Tony is back in the Premier League. Although he mightn't come into the team straight away, he's going to be worth keeping on your bench over the Christmas period. But make sure your team is well set up, because if it's not, you might end up only having 10 players for some game weeks. Picking a player like Ivan Toney, who is banned or may be injured for numerous games, has positives and negatives. If you get a couple of injuries on your team, you might have only 10 players per game week. With the heavy Christmas period coming, make sure you are prioritising players that are definitely going to start for your team.
Thanks very much for watching. Do make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok for any injury updates and those last minute waiver suggestions. We'll see you guys next week. FPL Draft Duo out.